All right. Hello, everyone. So we're going to get started with our fifth academic success webinar. Tonight we have the lovely Sarah, Dr. Weiss from CAPS. She's going to talk through some stress management strategies and resources and help us kind of prepare for the last, what do we have, month and a half left of school, which is coming up very quick. So we are very lucky to have her tonight. Just so we can recap, we have our Facebook and Instagram handles listed on the slide right now. Certainly follow us. There's a lot of good information listed on both of those accounts on upcoming webinars, handouts, lots of good resources for you to browse at your convenience. All right, let's get started. And without further ado, we've got our guest speaker for the night. Hello, how are you tonight?
Hi, I'm doing well, and thanks for bringing me on to talk about this. Okay, wait, let me just toggle back here. Wait a second.
No worries.
Sorry. Okay, just want to make sure I have control of the slides. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Sarah Weiss. I'm a clinical psychologist at CAPS, the Student Counseling Center here. And I was excited to talk about this tonight because, you know, as Ashley just said, heading into final exams period, or of course midterms, which seem to go on all semester, you know, it can pose challenges even to those of us who have great stress management skills. And even if we have great skills at our disposal, it never hurts to revisit some helpful ideas. So I'm going to be talking about a general model that I find helpful when I'm working with students on stress. And at the end, I will just talk a little bit, very briefly, about the counseling center here, who we are and what we do, and how to get extra help if that's something you're interested in. Okay. So I thought that would be helpful to start with the idea that not all stress is bad, which might be counterintuitive. There is this interesting relationship between how stressed we are and how able we are to function well. So at very low levels of stress, you might find that you're actually not all that motivated. That basically at low levels, stress essentially is motivation, right? We get a little tinge of helpful anxiety, which motivates us to do important things like, you know, registering for classes next semester, right? You've got that little tinge of anxiety. What happens if I don't? Well, I better go do that. And we have this kind of optimal level where stress is moderate and you might feel busy, but not overwhelmed. So it's kind of an energizing, good feeling of stress. But the problems really come at the high levels of the curve, right? And that's where we start to feel burned out, exhausted, overwhelmed, just sort of at capacity of what we can handle. And it's worth understanding what is happening in the brain and the body when we are chronically or even acutely under stress, right? So these things can happen over a long period of time when it's, you know, exam after exam and projects and commitments and friends and just kind of one thing after another can create sort of a chronically high level of stress or anxiety. These things can also happen very acutely, so quickly that you might not even be aware of it. You know, you step out into the street and suddenly out of the corner of your eye, you see there's a car coming. You know, you don't stop to think about how to respond. You just respond. You jump out of the way. And that's really what our fight or flight response is designed to do. It's designed to make us act quickly. And that has an evolutionary function. We wouldn't have gotten very far if we didn't have these very good survival instincts, right? To act, fight, or flee. And what's happening in the brain is basically that the very old, primal, primitive part of the brain, which is mostly governed by the amygdala, which sends fear responses to the rest of the brain, when it detects a threat, it tells the body, hey, get ready because there's a predator or there's a threat going on, right? So brain tells the body to pump blood into arms and legs, which is preparing your body to fight off a predator, flee the scene, get to safety. And what you experience then in your body are things like racing heartbeat, shaking, sweating, tunnel vision, all kinds of things which people tend to experience as anxiety, panic, stress. It can be a very scary experience. And the problem for most of us is that in daily life, the threats are not life-threatening, right? The threats tend to be things like a presentation I'm going to give, or an exam I have coming up, or, right, something that in modern life signals to the brain that there's a threat. And what happens is that, as you can see here, the prefrontal part of your brain, this was the last part of the brain to develop in evolution. This is the part of our brain that governs thinking, planning, logic. That part of your brain is shut down when you're having a fight or flight response because it's supposed to be, right? It's that jumping out of the way of the car. You're not supposed to think and analyze the situation. You're supposed to move. But so what I want to walk through are some steps with stress management to get the prefrontal cortex back online, right? To tell that the back of your brain, the amygdala, hey, it's okay. We're actually not under threat and we've got this. So let's look ahead. Just some basic signs and symptoms of stress. It can affect almost every aspect of the way we feel and think and the way we behave. So you might find that symptoms of stress are showing up mostly in your thoughts or your thought patterns. Trouble concentrating is probably one of the biggest. Anxious or racing thoughts, feeling like you can't stop worrying. Over to emotional symptoms. So you might find that you have a shorter fuse than usual, which is really common. Feeling more irritable, feeling like you can't relax and can't wind down. Moving over to physical symptoms, right? We carry the stress in our body. The mind and body are connected. So you might find that your shoulders are tense or you're having rapid heartbeat, again, kind of chronically in that fight or flight mode. Your body's preparing you to do something and take action, but in a way that's not helpful. And then behavioral symptoms, right? This shows up in our basic eating and sleeping patterns. We eat too much, we don't eat enough, sleeping too much, too little. We're going to talk a lot about procrastination and avoidance, but it's important, I think, to be alert to how is stress showing up for you and to learn to recognize the own signs of where that shows up in your life. So I put together what I like to think of as the stress model, and nice and easy to remember, of course, but pulling together different components of just a sort of across the board comprehensive way of managing stress. And, some strategies might work better for some people than others. It's really a question of where right now the stress is affecting you most. And so I encourage you to just keep thinking about that as we go through this. Where in your life is stress affecting you? Okay, so we're going to talk about structuring time, tolerating distress, when things can't be fixed right away or changed. How do we deal with just some painful emotions? Making time to relax, emphasis on relaxation is so important. Emotional resilience, which really means self-care. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you balancing your eating, getting exercise? Staying positive, and we're going to be talking about looking at thought patterns, and social connection, making sure that you don't isolate, right? Staying connected to other people is just one of the best ways that we can keep up our resilience for dealing with stress. All right. So for structuring time, people struggle with time management in different ways. For some people, it's not knowing when to stop working and when to take breaks. For others, it's, I don't know how to get started. And so here again, there's no one size fits all strategy here because everyone experiences stress differently, but it might be worth thinking about what are some of the common barriers? What gets in the way of you managing your time in a more effective way? So is it being late? Is it underestimating how long things take? You know, and an idea there is to, you know, switch that to overestimating how long things take. You know, if I think it's going to take me, if I know that, you know, walking to the shuttle stop is 5 minutes away and I tend to leave myself, you know, 5 minutes and 30 seconds, leave yourself 10 minutes, leave yourself 15 minutes, over prepare, sort of overestimate how long it might take you. Getting overwhelmed or not knowing where to start is really common. And this ties in really closely with the next item, which is unrealistic expectations, right? How many times do we say to ourselves, I have 3 overdue assignments to do and another paper, and I'm going to get all the overdue assignments done this afternoon before my next class. And not only is that not realistic, it's easy to get really overwhelmed when you look at the task ahead of you as being huge. So breaking things down into small steps until they feel more manageable. Well, okay, let's focus on, I'm not going to do the second assignment until I do the first assignment. And what do I need to do for the first assignment? If you put write paper on your to-do list, again, that can seem sort of insurmountable. So do I need an outline? Can I pull up my syllabus and start, you know, the ideas going? What do I need to put together an outline? Where am I going to find these articles? Do I have the login for the database? And breaking it down into really small steps. And setting realistic goals as well. And sometimes when anxiety is really high, what I recommend is for people to, you know, aim to write 1 sentence. If you're really having trouble with avoidance and you're staring at that blank screen, then your only goal is to write 1 sentence. And then if you can write one, write another one, and just, you know, take it just piece by piece. I'm going to skip trouble concentrating for 1 second because I'm going to come back to that. Getting exhausted and burned out is really common, especially here at Georgetown, right? Especially when you're just working for hours and hours at a time. Taking breaks is incredibly important, and it might seem like a waste of time, but your brain will thank you. Your body will thank you. You will feel the effect of not running on empty, and it helps to keep your energy up by taking breaks. So that might seem like there's no point, but it's much more effective in the long run. And then anxiety, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later, but you know, asking yourself, well, what am I anxious about, right? Rather than just getting stuck in the anxiety, take a step back. What is it about this assignment or this task or this meeting that's making me anxious? And again, we're going to talk about some more strategies for challenging anxious thoughts. One thing I'll just highlight here is a technique over here on the right called the Pomodoro technique. And it's a common strategy. Our colleagues over at the ARC use it all the time. And it's a way of breaking down work increments into 25 minutes. So the way you would do this is you would work for 25 minutes at a time and then take a 5-minute break. And then work for 25 minutes at a time again, 5-minute break. And by structuring it that way, what ends up happening is that first, it seems a lot easier to get started, right? Because you kind of think to yourself, well, I can work on anything for 25 minutes because it's only 25 minutes. And then you know when the break is coming up. And that also prevents you from overdoing it and overworking because there's structure in place. And another nice feature is that it prevents the breaks from becoming too long. So it's a nice strategy, and it's one that you can Google and get more information about. Okay. The next piece I want to touch on is tolerating distress. And what do I mean by that? It's really about getting through tough emotions or tough situations without making things worse. And that's really the key part, right? So much of what we do when we procrastinate are behaviors that end up causing their own problems. So I have spent the last 8 hours watching Netflix, and you know, if I was anxious before, you can bet that my anxiety about the schoolwork I'm not doing by the end of those 8 hours is way, way higher. So it's about making room, actually, for this is the situation I'm in right now. Kind of, you know, in some arenas, we would call this radical acceptance, kind of digging deep down and saying, yes, this is what's happening right now. And that means finding some willingness to be a little bit uncomfortable, right? It's the idea that not everything can be changed, and avoiding it just makes it worse. And so there's a lot of buzz now about mindfulness. Mindfulness is really the idea of just observing and accepting what is right now. Right now, I've got a lot to do and I'm feeling really anxious, and that's okay. And kind of seeing what is. And I liked this quote that the pain doesn't go away, we just make room for it, right? So often we seek help or come to CAPS or reach out because we want to fix, right? We want something to be fixed. We want to change the way we feel. And sometimes we can do that and sometimes we can't. And remembering that feelings come and go. There's this idea of sort of, these are the cards, this is the hand I've been dealt right now, and what can I do to be most skillful, most effective? Even having been dealt this hand that, I would rather not have. Relaxation is a really important component here. So, we talked about the fight or flight response, right? One of the best ways to directly target the fight or flight response is to work to calm down your body, because the fight or flight response is a really vicious cycle between the brain and body. So if you remember from a few minutes ago, we talked about how the brain detects a threat, sends a message to the body that there's danger coming, mobilize your resources, get ready to fight or flee. And so your body responds, it does its job, it starts pumping blood to your arms and legs. And so what happens then is your brain sees what the body is doing and says, oh, okay, we must be anxious. There must be a threat here because my heart is pumping and and my heart is racing and I'm sweating and I'm shaking, so I must be anxious. And then your body responds by saying, wait a minute, we must be anxious because the brain's giving me anxiety signals again. So it's on and on. It's a vicious cycle. So relaxation that targets the body's responses is going to work really well. I'll focus you first on the middle of this slide. So the acronym here that we want to remember is TIP skills. And again, this really slows down the fight or flight response. So we want to think about tipping your temperature, I'll explain what that means, intense exercise, pacing your breathing, and progressively relaxing your muscles. Okay, so, and there's a lot of information on this slide. I'll just kind of walk through it piece by piece. So and this is actually one of the most effective skills I know of, and I recommend it all the time. And it is incredibly helpful, especially for stopping panic attacks. So if you look here in the middle of the slide, on tip the temperature of your face, basically what you want to do here is use ice water to calm yourself down really quickly. So you can either fill up a sink full of water, put some ice in it, and actually stick your face in it and hold your breath, or hold something cold or frozen over your face and hold your breath. Caveat here, if you are on any medications or medically ill, or just feeling faint or not feeling well physically, this would not be the first thing to try. But for many of us, for most of us, it works quite well. And by holding your breath combined with the ice water, it actually convinces your body that you're underwater because it forces your heart rate to slow down. Another name for this is the dive response. And you can imagine that when your heart rate then slows back down, your brain says, I think we're calming down. And then your body gets the message from your brain that you're calming down. And the brain gets the message from your body that you're calming down. And it kind of reverses the whole feedback loop. Intense exercise, paradoxically or kind of counterintuitively, can be helpful, like running in place really fast, doing jumping jacks, right? You can kind of expend some extra energy and actually bring down the level of tension. The paced breathing and progressive muscle relaxation are quite helpful. So systematic breathing, we're over here on the left. We talk about breathing in for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 7, and exhaling for 8. And this is also, by the way, really helpful if you can't sleep. But what this does is, again, it slows down your heart rate. The key here is making the exhale longer than the inhale. So what you find is that your tension and your heart rate gradually and very systematically go back down. This one's great also for like exams, test anxiety, presentations, because you can do it anywhere. Same thing with progressive muscle relaxation over here on the right. So this is tensing up your muscles as tightly as you possibly can, and then letting them go. And you can do this, from your feet, legs, midsection, arms, shoulders, neck, face, and then back down. And by targeting each muscle group, and you really want to tense them up as tightly as you can until the muscles shake, and then let it all go. You don't want to feel any pain or cramping, but again, kind of like the intense exercise, you're actually increasing the amount of tension temporarily and on purpose, which then makes your body let go and get down to a lower level of tension than you were at before. So also really helpful, also great because you don't need anything to do it. You can, take a break, go to the bathroom and do it there. You can even do it in class. So it's handy in that way. Okay, just checking how we're doing on time. The next piece that I wanted to address is emotional resilience. And I think of this as kind of our emotional immune system. And, we learn a lot about the physical immune system and what the body needs to fight off illness. But our emotional immune system is worth thinking about too, right? What do we need to give us the best chance of being resilient and coping well, even when things are hard? And most of this is preventative. Most of this is about kind of long-term habits that we just really want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on. So an acronym here to remember these is PLEASE. And so that focuses on treating physical illness, and really taking care of that, right? Going to student health if you think something's wrong, taking care of your body, listening to your body. Balancing eating, not eating too much or too little, eating regularly throughout the day, making sure that you're getting, a balanced meals of, a protein, a carbohydrate, a fat, paying attention to how drugs and alcohol influence your mood. We could do a whole other webinar just on that, on the connection between drugs and alcohol and our moods. There's another real vicious cycle that can happen there. We use drugs and alcohol to cope with how we're feeling, and then in turn, over time, it worsens those problems. So really keeping an eye on that. And balancing sleep and getting exercise. I'll focus here on sleep for a moment because this is such a common thing that we struggle with. So if you look over here, some of the things that I talk most with students about are things like not working or not doing homework in bed, or not, using your laptop in bed, which, is probably a lot of us, right? But making sure that really the only thing you're doing in bed is sleeping, because you want your brain to associate your bed with the place where you sleep and rest, not the place where you do your homework, right? You want your brain to have the right association with the sort of bed environment. Another thing I'll just flag here, which is really helpful, is that if you can't sleep and you're tossing and turning in bed, it's actually more helpful to get out of bed and leave rather than be restless and tossing and turning. Again, because of the association, right? You want your brain to associate your bed with the place where you're sleepy and drowsy and feeling rested and restful, as opposed to the place where you've spent the last hour tossing and turning. So go to another room, don't do anything too exciting, no screens, absolutely no screens during the night. But, read something, try to keep the lights low if you can, and then go back to the bedroom when you're tired. Okay. Let's see here. So staying positive. This is really about, some of you may be familiar with the idea of cognitive distortions. And these are, they're negative thought patterns that tend to be associated with things like depression and anxiety and anger. And we all do these to some extent, but often when we are experiencing really high levels of stress, and especially when those levels of stress are chronic, our thought patterns tend to play a really big role. And what do I mean by that? So we want to start looking at patterns here, right? For example, we tend to jump to the worst case scenario and think, I'm going to fail. I'm definitely going to fail this exam. And if I fail this exam, how will I get a job? And if I can't get a job, my parents will be mad at me. And if they're mad at me, then they won't give me money. And right, so the thinking can really, really spiral. Same thing with, kind of overgeneralizing, which is another one of these unhelpful thinking styles. Overgeneralizing means taking one instance and making it global. So I always screw this up. I always do this, and I never do well enough, right? So keep an eye out for things like always and never. Paying attention to things like mental filter, right? So, we all have this tendency to focus on, the one bad grade we got when all of the others were good, or the one person who was, kind of maybe cold to you today or sort of weird when in fact you had like 7 other really positive interactions in your day, but the negatives have a way of overpowering the positives. All or nothing thinking, right? I'm either perfect or I'm a failure. And you can see how, these thinking styles really contribute to shame, self-loathing, anxiety, and it's worth stepping back from these. We tend to believe everything we think, but this sort of says, well, could we challenge that? Could we step back from our own thoughts and challenge whether these thoughts are really accurate? So over here on the right are some good questions to ask and to challenge your own thinking and to say, well, wait a second. How do I know if this thought is accurate? What evidence do I have to support that that's true? Do I know for sure that this person's upset with me, or is that my worst case scenario? Am I doing what's called mind reading? Like I'm imagining I know exactly what they're thinking. Am I blaming myself unnecessarily? Am I making assumptions? Shades of gray is really important. Is there something in between being perfect and being a failure? I'm good at some things and I'm not so good at others. Some people like me a lot and others may not. So it's important to, I think of this as starting to sort of poke holes in our own thinking. And this is tough work. This is really hard work. And this is an approach that's done really well in a style of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, where the focus is really on challenging your own thoughts and working over time to reframe them, catching the thought and reframing, catching the thought and reframing. And there are different ways to do that. All right, so we'll finish up with the stress management part by focusing on social connection. And there's 2 really helpful pieces here that I want to focus in on, and they might seem contradictory. But one is willingness to be vulnerable, asking for help, saying, you know what, I'm really stressed out, and could we just watch a movie tonight? I have no idea what's going on in this class. Can you help me? It's willing to make mistakes. It's willing to admit that you don't know what you're doing, because that's how we get real connection. And I've heard that that's especially hard here at Georgetown at times, to say, hey, I'm struggling, and I don't necessarily have it all together. And people are always surprised at the responses they get, which are, wow, me too, and I had no idea anyone else was feeling this way. Helpful phrases for saying no. I think that saying no is a huge part of also managing stress, and it means setting boundaries. And it means saying, I'd like to, but I can't right now. I'm going to say no for right now. I'll let you know if something changes. I've got too much that I'm committed to, so I have to turn it down. And really checking in with yourself about, does that bring up feelings of guilt or shame? And, kind of going back to, some of these thinking styles, right? If it brings up thoughts like, I should never say no, or this person will be mad at me, then that would be a good opportunity to say, well, do I know that for sure? And is there another way to look at that? All right. So let's move ahead and just finish up quickly with who we are at CAPS, what we do. So we've got a really awesome multidisciplinary staff. We have psychologists, we have people who are training to be psychologists. So we've got people who are doing field placements and are doctoral students. We've got residents who rotate through for a semester or a year. Those are residents in psychiatry who help prescribe medication. We have postdoctoral fellows, so psychologists who have just gotten their degrees. And of course, in addition to licensed psychologists and senior staff, assistant directors, associate directors, and the director, social workers, we have psychiatrists who prescribe medications, and administrative staff, and we really represent a pretty diverse array of backgrounds and specialties on the staff. So anything ranging from anxiety, depression, eating disorders, adjustment. I'll skip ahead to, since I'm on that topic, some of the concerns that we see. These are actually the top 5 problems that we saw in the past year. So number 1, what we're here to talk about, anxiety and stress, and that's actually consistent with counseling centers across the country now are seeing a big increase in anxiety and stress. And feeling down and depressed is a very close second to that. We see people with relationship problems, people who are having trouble adjusting, feeling lonely, feeling like I haven't quite found my people here or the connections I was looking for yet. That goes along with adjustment problems, especially for international students. Making that adjustment can be especially difficult, and academic problems, falling behind, can't concentrate, all kinds of things. We have different kinds of services. So first step is a screening, and that's a brief 5, 10, 15-minute conversation by phone or in person to talk about what's going on and what brings you in. At that point, we can identify resources and point you in the right direction. An initial consultation is a longer appointment where you sit down with one of our clinicians one-on-one and talk about what's been going on, what the problems are, and the clinician will come up with a treatment plan for you and recommend steps going forward. We have ongoing sessions where that's appropriate. Mostly we offer brief therapy and short-term therapy. We can, in some rare cases, offer long-term therapy, but we always offer referrals to the community where long-term therapy would be appropriate. So something that's more ongoing and open-ended in nature, or for students who need more specialized treatment than we can offer. And we have group therapy. I'll tell you about a workshop I'm starting in just a moment. We have an emergency after hours phone, which I'll give you the number for. And of course, we consult with all kinds of people. Okay, we're at the back of Darnell Hall, for those of you who don't know where we are, up around the back of Epicurean. And we are offering a stress management workshop. So it pulls together some of the things that I've spoken about here tonight, but gives you a chance to talk to me more in person directly and get more individualized help. And we go into more detail about the skills and strategies. It's free, it's confidential. Feel free to drop in. And that's about it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bellivan-Weiss, for that great information. And I definitely encourage everyone to use CAPS as a resource on campus. They are fantastic. There are fantastic people working there, especially as we're getting into ending midterms, getting into the final season. It's especially important to make sure you're taking care of ourselves. And make sure you guys go check out the stress management workshop. that CAPS is now sponsoring on Wednesdays from 11 to 12. I think it's a great resource on campus. So thank you again so much for your time. We so appreciate it. And just as a reminder for everyone else, we are having our next academic success webinar series on finals prep, so setting up a study schedule, and that will be next Tuesday, November 14th, same Zoom link we always use at 5:30. If you have any feedback on this webinar or any of our other webinars, you can provide it to us on our webinar feedback form, the tinyurl.com/ARC webinar feedback. If you have ideas for future webinars, we would love to hear them. Again, thanks everyone for joining us. We appreciate it, and a big thanks to Dr. Bellevin-Weiss, and we'll see you guys next week.